Welcome, everyone, to this session on translating global processes into action, where the session is looking at how do we leverage UN Food Systems Summit solutions in the resolution decade. Rehabilitation of degraded land is one of the focal areas of action track 3, titled Boosting Nature Positive Production, which is in the UN Food Systems Summit. This session, therefore, will discuss how global processes could be translated into local actions. We will hear concrete examples of implementation on the ground from African farmers, and we also have representatives from UN Food Systems Summit, the UN Decade, and UNCCD, who will also answer some of the questions that we have around this topic. We hope you're enjoying the conference so far. Please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat box and let us know what you think is needed to ensure the implementation of global commitment on the ground for the benefit of both people and nature. Now allow me to invite the keynote speaker for this session, Ms. Tina BIRMPILI. Tina BIRMPILI is the Deputy Executive Secretary of the UNCCD and has over 25 years of experience in policy analysis and implementation, especially on sustainable development related issues and management. Welcome, Tina. Please share with us, how do we restore the balance with nature to feed the planet?
Thank you, Tangu, and dear friends, it's an honor to introduce this session, during which we will consider how to feed a growing population in a way that boosts nature instead of depleting it. This is a task to undertake as we set out on the crucial UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. Our food systems are linear. We produce, we consume, and we throw. We consume the food the systems produce, and the systems consume our planet. Expanding croplands and grazing lands are encroaching even further on the natural world. We are losing forests, drylands, and grasslands that provide us with clean air and water, healthy soils, and the raw materials for us to develop and prosper. We are destroying vital carbon sinks, helping to drive climate change. Changing course during the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration means combining land restoration with nature-positive agricultural practices and a global move to a resource-efficient and circular economy. Let us look at 3 actions areas in turn, starting with a huge opportunity in restoration. Global commitments are in place to restore over 1 billion of hectares of degraded land. Land restoration solutions have to be front and center at the Food Systems Summit in September. Over a quarter of this land, as Robert Nasi told us before, can be restored to produce food. Africa has a huge role to play here. Much of the restoration commitments are in Africa, including those put in place through land degradation neutrality targets under the UNCCD and the Bond Challenge. Africa can show global leadership by developing a pipeline of restoration activities to start delivering on the commitments. The Great Green Wall, an African-led movement, is an epic ambition to restore 100 million hectares of degraded lands by 2030. We want more of those. Such activities create jobs for men, for women, for youth. They stabilize rural livelihoods and create resilience to climate change and other shocks. They bring back lost nature and biodiversity. And crucially, for this huge and diverse continent, they increase food and nutritional security. Restoration alone is not enough, so we also need a global shift to nature-positive and sustainable agriculture. Current methods of food production are resource-intensive, resulting in harmful inefficiencies. So we must grow more food with less land and less water. This means adopting agroecological approaches and regenerative practices such as agroforestry, organic agriculture, sustainable rangeland management. Such practices promote efficient resource use, conserve ecosystems, and often bring higher yields and nutritional value than many high-input, resource-intensive, and monocultural systems. At the Food Systems Summit in September, we will unleash such game-changing solutions with coalitions to help finance and advance their implementation. But these solutions need to be adapted to local conditions and meet the needs and aspirations of the communities involved. Indigenous people, local communities often lead the way in environmental stewardship, promoting collective land rights, democratic inclusion, and women's leadership. Where they manage the land, degradation is slower. Strengthened land tenure security will empower these communities and incentivize long-term investments in sustainable agriculture. This would quickly create new green jobs through value addition, economies of scale, and greater market access. We must recognize that food producers need support and incentives that empower them to assure greater and assume greater responsibility. Aligning small-scale production to local and regional demand will help reduce the pressure to convert natural ecosystems to agricultural land. Just as important is global reform to consumption patterns. The growing demand for cheap, processed foods and meat-rich diets is a global problem as it drives agricultural expansion and monoculture. Food loss and food waste are equally large global problems. Any food lost or wasted is water and land squandered and greenhouse gases emitted. Reducing the amount of food wasted, mostly in the developed world, is a moral imperative. So we need to reduce the large amount of food lost post-harvest, mostly in developing countries. Again, all of these moves need to be front and center at the Food System Summit and during the Restoration Decade. Dear friends, we have a job of work to do, but we have the tools, the skills, and the technology to do it. We have the imperative in the growing threats, climate change, nature loss, land degradation, and pollution are posing to our existence. And this year, we have the opportunity. We can leverage the new investments, business models, and partnerships of the Food System Summit and the Restoration Decade. And we can further back the global transformation of food systems by ensuring that COVID-19 recovery packages back solutions that restore land, make agriculture nature positive, and end the global linear culture of take, make, and waste. We must make the straight line of our thinking and of our systems a circle. We should move from our linear economy to a circular one. If we do this together, we will build a healthier, more peaceful, and more sustainable future. Allow me to finish on a personal note. I was privileged enough to live for many years in Kenya. What I learned there is a lesson for life. There is no other place than the drylands of Africa where bringing land into balance is the key to bringing food, water, energy, and nature into balance. I thank you.
Tina, for those enlightening words. Yes, you've challenged everyone in the statement that you've just made. We really have to make the most of the opportunities that are available for us to enhance food security. And it is possible to take care of nature as well as feed our people from what you have just shared. Next, we'll hear from JOAO CAMPARI. He is the global lead for food practice with WWF International. He's also the chair of Action Track 3 for the UN Food Systems Summit. JOAO, in 3 minutes, having heard what Tina has shared, introduce the UN Food Systems Summit and tell us more about what Action Track 3 entails and what we should expect.
Thank you, Tangu, and thanks, Tina. Delighted to be here for this introduction. You know, I'd just like to share a few reflections. The first one is that this year and next are very important years for land restoration. And I dare to say that these years will pretty much determine where and how we land in 2030, which is the year in which we need to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals. And a few examples that Tina just cited. I mean, the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration is being launched this week. In July, actually, we have the UN Food Systems Pre-Summit. And in September, the actual summit will happen. We will also have the Climate and Biodiversity Conferences, the UNCCD conference next year. So all these are fundamental processes and spaces to a large extent that we should solidify them around restoration. The UN Food Systems Summit is an important step to integrate food systems transformation in the 3 conventions and connect with the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. And here's how. In Action Track 3 of the Food Systems Summit, we depart from the premise that our job is to help resolve 3 interconnected crises. The first one is the biodiversity loss, second, climate change, and third, food insecurity. And the way that we produce food today needs to change from being a problem to becoming a solution. This is important globally, but much more so in Africa, where these 3 crises feed on each other more rapidly, and therefore is most impactful on nature and on the livelihoods of the African population. So the goal of Action Track 3 is to boost nature-positive production at scale to meet the fundamental human right to healthy and nutritious food within planetary boundaries. To deliver on this goal, we designed in Action Track 3 areas for action. The first one focuses on freezing the footprint of food production. So we protect natural ecosystems from new deforestation and new conversions for food and feed production. The second action area considers how to sustainably manage existing food production systems in land and in water for the benefit of people and nature. And finally, our third action area looks at restoring degraded ecosystems and rehabilitating soil function for sustainable food production. This is the focus of our plenary session today. And within this action area, we are considering elevating the profile of grasslands and savannas restoration and are setting up a soils and ecosystem restoration hub. All this will be of huge importance for African countries. We would like to encourage you to actively participate in the discussions that are leading up to the pre-summit and summit and help us design the actions that will take us forward on a safe pathway to 2030. Your voices will be essential in translating our thoughts into viable solutions and actions that can implement at scale and within pace in your countries. We hope to see you at least virtually in the pre-summit and the summit, the pre-summit in July and the summit in September. I really look forward to a productive discussion today with lots of actionable ideas that we can take forward to help accelerate the delivery of the SDGs. Thank you, delighted to be here.
Thank you very much, Joao. I like the emphasis on implementation of restoration and how we need to transform our food systems. I mean, from my home country in Malawi, farmers at times have to grow maize literally in the riverbeds just to get an extra harvest if the rain-fed crop didn't do well. Others are encroaching into protected areas with high biodiversity value, for example, just to supplement their food production at the households. So we've really been challenged, and I look forward to a successful summit that will drive this. How do we feed the people without really harming the nature for future and future generations that are coming? The next session will feature 3 examples. And this is going to be exciting because now we're looking at how to scale up protection, management, and restoration of the land. We will hear from 3 interesting individuals who will tell us what they are doing with a focus on protecting and managing and restoring. We have with us today Fatima Kaba from Enda Energy Environment Development in Senegal. We also have Desmond Koney. Desmond is a CEO and founder for Complete Farmer coming from Ghana. We also have PATRICIA KOMBO. She's the founder of PRABHU Initiative and UNCCD Land Hero coming from Kenya. You have 3 minutes each. Let's start with Fatima. Tell us what you are doing.
Good morning, everybody. I share with you a local initiative on Balinese tree in the global landscape protection. My name is Fatima Kaba. I work in an NGO based in Dhaka called Enda Energy. I am a geographer specialist in environment. In recent years, I focus on sustainable land management, specifically in promoting value chains in rural areas for communities' resilience. This is why I work on non-timber forest products, particularly on the Balanete tree within the Green World Initiative. The area of there are a lot of potentiality in arid land, particularly in the Green World Initiative area, and that focuses on the development of sustainable enterprises in arid zone in order to boost economy and preserve species. Thereby, ENDA has identified Balanites, which has high potential that is underexploited at local level. The development of this plant can contribute to the achievement of sustainable development goals as well as environmental agreements goals. Our challenge was to empower Senegalese silver pastoral area to sustainably exploit the Balanites tree in arid land and facilitate the marketing of non-timber forest products through natural regeneration. Besides that, we aim to develop local entrepreneurship with the management of non-timber forest product value chains, strengthen the resilience of forest ecosystem and the livelihoods of local communities, reduce the painfulness of artisanal processing, and to strengthen local governance and enhance the protection of natural resources. We can use Balanites as a food, as livestock feed, in medicinal and cosmetic fields, as cooking fuel, and as organic fertilizer in agriculture. What achievements include entrepreneurship training session for communities, analysis of the potential of Balanites that grows across the Sahel, assistance to communities to set up cooperatives, equipment provision, carry out economic studies of the sector and development of a business model based on public-private partnership approach. We are still looking for the private sector for this initiative. Communities want to enhance their capacities to better use in a sustainable way the Balanites tree, modernize the processing procedures. And I have one question is how to efficiently bring the knowledge and tools on the ground to ensure women, men, and youth can implement to better manage and protect trees on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fatima. We've taken note of that question. We'll get back to you. Now it's your turn, Desmond.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. My name is Desmond KONEY, and I'm the CEO of Complete Farmer. At Complete Farmer, we believe in building a world that is able to feed itself by working together. My background is in mechanical engineering, and basically, Complete Farmer is an application of engineering principles into farming to make it an effective value chain. At Complete Farmer, what the problems we are trying to solve is we all know that industries all over the world are in search of agricultural commodities. So there's huge food demand. However, we have a huge problem when it comes to farmers meeting this demand in Africa, not just because of the broken value chain, but among other things, dry land seems to be a really huge problem for these farmers. The climate, they have to contend against climate changes as well. So when we started, we knew we had to do things differently. And so the approach that we used was to build a platform that made it possible for farmers all over the world to be able to connect directly to markets. Now, this sounds very simple, but a lot had to go into the thought process. So at Complete Farmer, the way we tackle this problem is to make sure that farmers are growing crops directly to meet the market specification. And by doing that, it means that they are eliminating a lot of waste. So for instance, if a pharmaceutical company wants carrots, this is different from the carrots that is needed by a hotel chain, for instance. And so how do these farmers grow the crop in such a way that they give the crop what the crop just needs to meet the market demand, thereby not having a lot of runoff and a lot of waste at the end of the process. So we start by taking the specifications from the market We assist that we then match these specifications to farmers on our platform. And we have developed data-driven production protocols that these farmers can use and adapt to their production. We monitor them live with satellites and to make sure they are following these protocols that have been given to them to grow exactly what they need to meet the market specification, preserving the land, and also taking into consideration the effect of climate on their production. At the end of the process, they can trade with these buyers and make real returns at the end of the process. The buyers are able to build an entire supply chain on top of blockchain technology and to be able to source for these commodities from the farmers. So this is basically the work that Complete Farmer is doing. We currently are looking to expand our model in other parts of Africa to involve more farmers and give farmers that ability to be able to reach global market. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Desmond. Patricia.
Thank you very much. Hello, my name is Patricia from Kenya, and I'm the founder of PATRI Initiative and a UNCCD Land Hero. And what we are doing in Kenya, I noticed a gap in knowledge sharing and also communities integrating to the new systems on how to farm and how to do their things, either produce sustainably and also consume sustainably. So what we are doing under PATRI, first of all, is bridging the gap and also educating communities by changing their mindset towards land and also working the journey in managing and also restoring what has been degraded and also working with school pupils. So far we visited 15 schools because we know we are transiting to green economy, and we want, as the pupils transit from the school system, at least they will know the value of land and they will know how to use land sustainably as a source of income, as a source of employment, and also as a source of improving livelihoods in their communities. So our key area, first of all, is working on kitchen gardens, an idea that has not been practiced in my community. People have been growing maize, tilting up to the riverbanks, but now we are training them on how to utilize the available resources, that is water, because our area is a semi-arid. And with kitchen gardens, we harvest water using water pans, and we train how they can water their crops, or rather their food, maximally, ensuring they protect and they use water the way it's supposed. And also using household water, like from kitchen, instead of pouring it, they can put it in use by watering their kitchen gardens. That's how we are managing. Secondly, we are working on fruit trees because we realize there's a lot of degradation because people want to expand land. Now we are working with communities by training them how to grow fruit trees in their farms and also the right trees, indigenous trees in their farms, just to ensure they do not invade the forest areas. And we've been doing this by, first of all, bringing them and putting them at the center of implementation and making them know the journey and the benefits that they will get, and working and telling them that restoration is not imported. It is them to restore their land. And we've made our restoration to be zero costly, whereby we harvest indigenous trees. We collect fruit trees like mango seeds and oranges. Instead of drawing the seeds, we put them in sun-dry, we put them in a community nursery. And from there, they are now confident enough of the benefits that they get. And finally, we are protecting land, and we are doing this by growing trees, because initially some land has been degraded, some soil cover has been lost. So we are working with communities to ensure we put them together so that they can advance, and also by changing their mindset from shifting from what they thought it is normal, like applying excessive fertilizers, using pesticides which they do not understand, to transiting to use organic farming, and also changing the mindset that you need a large piece of land so that you can harvest. We are training them in a quarter an acre, you can actually harvest what you perceive would have been harvested in 3 acres of land. So we want them to use land maximally so as to benefit themselves and to restore the ecosystem. And I've heard about the UN system, and I have a question to them. How can UN food systems support rural communities, transform the way they produce and consume food to restore ecosystem and maximize production in a sustainable way? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Having heard from the three of you guys, I mean, we can all see that Africa has a lot of opportunities as we understand, of course, the local context, because all of you are providing solutions that are fitting the issues that the communities within the areas where you are working are getting the support. Going back to the questions, each one of you has raised questions. To answer those, let me introduce the three panelists that will answer, will help us get answers to that. We have METTE WILKIE. METTE is the director of the Forestry Division within the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO. She has over 30 years of experience in the international research and policy advisory, of course, in forestry and environmental management. Welcome, METTE. We also have Martin Frick. Martin is the deputy of the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for the Food System Summit 2021. He served before as the Senior Director of UN Climate Change, where he was also overseeing the implementation of the Paris Agreement and the Secretary's climate action work. Welcome, Martin. And lastly, but not least, we have Tato Mokhati. Tato Mokhati, interestingly, is a fashion designer, but she turned herself into an agripreneur and founder of JOAO 13 in Botswana. She had a satisfying career as a fashion designer in her native country, but she has since turned her sights on the farming industry, and she's now running a commercial farming enterprise. My first question will go to Martin. How can we make sure that the results and ambitions from the UN Food System Summit will be integrated in the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration and Land Regeneration Neutrality targets? Because these things are talking to each other as right now. And we also want to see long-term implementation for the summit for us to really call it success, to call it a success. So share with us, what is it really? How can we
thank you. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. I have already worked at UNFCCC on the decade of landscape restoration. And I'm very happy to see, as JOAO said, that restoration is one of the three main areas in Action Track 3. Because I truly believe that landscape restoration at scale is a game changer. That's a word that's maybe often used, but here it is really appropriate. So what can such a summit do? It can help bringing to life coalitions that support landscape restoration. We hear often from our member states, we are not supposed to invent anything new, and we don't have to invent anything new because the decade of restoration is there. But we can put a spotlight on it, and we will be publishing a Secretary General statement of action in which the SG is going to bring together everything we have heard in this truly inclusive and global engagement process. And this statement of action is setting up a new inspiring narrative around food systems. And since landscape restoration is doing exactly that, bringing the different aspects together, highlighting the importance not only for food security, but for carbon sequestration, for water management, providing livelihoods, building resilience. This is something this summit can do. But clearly, we see this summit as a start point, as a political moment in which we bring these issues to the attention of heads of states and government. And with the pre-summit that is going to be happening in July in Rome, we also have the opportunity really to bring together a whole set of ministers and civil society, because these systemic approaches is often something that people demand, but they are hard to do. You know, people are comfortable in their comfort zones. We are trying to take them out and have cross-cutting conversations, including health, including youth, including environment, to make that happen. And allow me to close on a personal note. I worked with FAO before, and I've been in this landscape restoration world since more than a decade. And my frustration came often with, you present a project to donors that can do so many things in tandem, and you would expect that donors jump on it. But more often than not, you're basically hearing, that's great, but it is actually a climate change project, and you should talk to climate change donor. And if you talk to them, they will tell you it's a food system, it's a food security issue. So why not talking to them? And then people would say, well, you say there's a community empowerment and a strong gender aspect. Why don't you apply for a gender project? And that needs to stop. We need to make people understand how well money is invested in landscape restoration, how cheap a solution it is, and how many co-benefit it brings. Let me stop here and back to you, Tangu.
Thank you very much, Martin. You have said a lot. And before I start going back to emphasize most of the points that you've read, which are very important, let me bring in METTE here. How will and can the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration scale up dryland restoration in African countries? What ingredients do we need to bring the UN Decade to the people on the ground and generate action? Having heard the issues that Martin has just raised as well, putting everything together briefly, METTE.
Thank you, Tangu. And certainly when we were tasked with developing a strategy for the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, that was FAO together with UN Environment, we were sort of looking at the barriers and looking exactly what it is that we need to have in order to make this a success. It's a huge decade, it's a huge ambition, but we want to make it a success. And we actually found that there were 6 things that we would need to do. We would need to create public awareness. People need to know why we need to do restoration, why it's important, and why is it urgent. We would need the political will of governments, private sector, and decision makers. And we would need a legal and policy environment that was enabling action. So we need to tackle issues such as tenure. We need to transform perverse incentive into positive incentives. We also need the technical capacity to restore the very different ecosystems that we have across the world. And in some cases, we would actually need some more research to find answers to our questions. And lastly, and importantly, of course, we would need finance. So when we prepared that strategy, we focused on sort of 3 pathways, if you will, to overcome the barriers and to deliver those ingredients. The first one is to generate that global movement of restoration, the generation restoration, as we call it. The second part was to help enhance that political will and empower decision makers and leaders in both the public and private sector to be champions of ecosystem restoration. And the third one was to support that delivery at scale by generating the technical capacity that's needed. So to help us with that, we've set up 5 task forces looking at specific issues. So we have one on best practices. We have one on monitoring progress so we can showcase what is being done and through that generate more commitment. We have one on science, we have one on finance, and we're establishing one on youth as well. We've also developed a communication and outreach plan to help establish that global movement. And I hope that you have seen a lot of things happening this week. We have the official launch at the end of this week, so you will see much more about this coming up. We've also developed a digital hub to share information and experiences with all those that are interested. And we are mobilizing partners and resources and looking at ways to unlock that finance that's needed to meet the aims of the decades, which are to prevent, halt, and reverse the degradation of all types of ecosystems worldwide. But let me come back to restoration of African drylands, because here there are commitments and many efforts underway that we can build on, including the Great Green Wall that Tina was referring to. There's also a very large JEF program on dryland sustainable landscapes, which was launched earlier today, and I hope some of you were able to attend that event too. But more than anything else, we're also looking to all of you to help tell us where restoration is most needed and how we can help make that happen.
Thank you very much, METTE. from what you have just said, we really need to build a restoration movement that will restore our degraded landscapes at scale. At the same time, ensuring that we have cleared the enabling environment. We do not have a lot of time. Let me now go to Tato. Tato, having heard about the global processes like the UN Food System Summit and the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, what do you expect and how important are global processes to local implementation? Because this is where the tire hits the road. What is needed from your experience for an implementation at farm level?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's, sessions like these are very, very important. I was glad to hear Martin talking about nature positive production because moving forward, that is really what we need to do in order to protect our environment and to get as much as we can out of it, right? Having said that, about 80% of food produced on the continent is produced by small-scale farmers. However, investment is geared toward commercial farmers. So what we need to do is bring in our small-scale farmers. And one of the ways to do that is to tap our education resources, right? We produce a lot of science graduates from the various universities across the continent who are good in crop science graduates and soil science graduates annually. But what I've found is that when we're producing these scientists who don't fit into the African landscape, right? So we need to find a way to bridge the gap between our scientists and the farmer's mindset and produce a more robust scientist. This is talking towards now our education systems, right? We need to have more linkages between the scientists and have more linkages between them and the farmers on the ground. When we do that, this is how now we start producing more within a nature positive way. I'll give you an example in what I'm doing personally. At the farm, I'm producing tomatoes on 1.5 hectares, what would traditionally require just over 3 hectares to produce. This means I'm using less land, I'm using less water, I'm using less chemicals. I'm actually rotating my water and recycling it. So I'm putting more back into the land that I'm taking out. Now, to get more of us into that sort of farming, we need to bring our governments more into play. We need infrastructure. And by infrastructure, I'm talking roads, I'm talking electricity, I'm talking connectivity, internet connectivity, roads to move produce in and out of the farms. These new technologies all require electricity and connectivity. These are the things that will bring in youth into farming. These are the things that will bring in these young professionals into farming, because let's face it, if we as Africa are going to feed the world by 2050, we're going to have a very hard time of doing it, because currently all our farmers, our parents, they're old and they will not be around in that time to do that. So what we need to do is bring in all these new technologies, all these new infrastructure, and bring it to farm level. And by bringing it to farm level, we're bringing the education back as well. So I mean, I think for now, that in my belief is what would help us move in the right direction.
Thank you very much, Tato. You have actually answered 2 more questions that I was going to ask Martin and METTE. The first one was on how can the UN Food System Summit support rural communities transform the way they produce. You have spoken about that. And you also touched on how can we engage the youth, other entrepreneurs that are engaging in agricultural practices and restoration in our African countries to strengthen those value chains to enhance their competitiveness economically, actually. One question that I have, looking at the time now, how do we efficiently share knowledge? Because we've heard during these few minutes that there is a lot in terms of best practices. We have information, we have tools, we have places where we can learn from. We can learn from on how to do things, but then how do we efficiently share this knowledge to ensure that women, youth, the men can implement restoration initiatives in the way that brings us all together as we build this movement. I don't know, this was supposed to be yours again, Tado, but let me ask Martin to come in like literally 30 seconds. And then Mitty can also weigh in a bit.
Well, there is one bit of the Food System Summit, which is called foodsystems.community, which is a website where everybody can register and where we are trying to share the knowledge. I think it's very often a translation issue. So we will soon venture into having artificial intelligence translation, but it's not only translation into different languages. It's also a question of translating, understanding what people who are not experts would type in and search for, and understanding what the needs are, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Metin, 30 seconds.
Absolutely. That's why we set up the task force on good practices to try and find out what is already available there. What are the gaps? So we did a gap analysis to find out if there are, for some ecosystems, there's not enough knowledge on how to restore, if there are some good practices that are not available in local languages or not easily accessible. What we will do with all of this information, and we are looking to you to help us get some more, is to set up a digital hub where we can showcase all of the best practices, we can showcase initiatives, and through that help attract more information, investors, and other types of support to those who really need it on the ground. So that could be to help them prepare good business plans, to secure additional funding, to have some marketing expertise. So building on the good practices and linking it to existing and planned initiatives on the ground through that hub that can reach out to millions of people across the world.
Thank you very much. I really hope we had more time, and I hope everyone has enjoyed this session and learned as much as I have about the potential to achieve multiple benefits from restoration, where food systems are considered as part of the solution. The game-changing solutions that have been mentioned over and over again within the 5 action tracks in the UN Food Systems Summit really are going to provide a tangible pathway, as well as meaningful partnerships and coalitions to feed directly into the UN decade strategy. To close, let me invite RAVI PRABHU. He's the Director for Innovation, Investment and Impact at C4 IGRAF. He has a lot of experience as well related to sustainability and resilience of management systems. He is a forester, just like me, and fortunately for him, we received the Queen's Award for Forestry in 2005. Let me call you, Ravi, to close this session with your words to move us and push us into a point where we're balancing food production and restoration. Ravi.
Thanks, Tangu, and I'm not sure what I can add. I mean, I've been simply blown away by the wisdom and offer here. Starting with Tina. Tina was almost poetic with her words. I loved the thought that, as we consume food, the food systems consume the planet. It's such a powerful word image. But so many interesting things. There were 1 or 2 strands were coming out very strongly for me. There's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of understanding, technical solutions. My sense, though, is we need to watch out for technocratic solutions. Technical, yes, technocratic, wrong. Because I think what we need to do is reset our relationship with nature from one of use to one of nurture. And I heard that a little bit, perhaps strongest in what Patricia was saying, but Tangu, also what you said, in some of the words that you talked about, value, METTE, about mindsets, changing mindsets. So Martin, if the UN Food System Summit can change one thing, it should change the paradigm within which we deal with nurture. We need a different language, we need a different metaphor. We almost need to become once more a community of learners, because there is going to be no single solution and no solution that is permanent. We're going to have to learn and learn again, invent, co-invent, co-reinvent every now and then in every situation. There is no one maize growing solution for Malawi, Tangu, and maize is Malawi's big problem. And it is this silver bullet thinking that we need to get away with. So METTE, I hope we need more than just a bit of research. I think we need to become a community of learners and researchers ourselves. I would almost call that we start thinking about a paradigm of a duty of care land economy, moving away from exploitation and use to a duty of care, to nurture, to understanding that we are a collective, we are a community, and this community is manifold. It's going to take all the kinds of inventiveness that we've heard today. And if we can do that, and the Food System Summit leads us into a paradigm of respect for nature, then the process of restoration will be the process of recreation. And I'm pretty sure in that renaissance lies the future of our planet. Thank you very much.
I can't say more, Ravi. Thank you very much for those words. This is the end, everyone. Thank you very much for being with us in this session. Thank you.